Hello, listeners. Welcome back to Africa to Alpha, a podcast series by Real Cup Capital, spotlighting the founders, investors, and ecosystem builders shaping Africa's innovation economy. Each episode delivers candid, insight rich conversations that unpack the real stories, strategic decisions, and lived experiences behind the people moving the continent from potential to performance. From angel investing and diaspora capital to sector defining startups and market shaping ideas, Africa to Alpha brings listeners closer to the voices driving Africa's next chapter. I'm your host, Chris Canway, and today we're diving into a conversation that sits right at the heart of what this podcast is all about, the intersection of capital, community, and the future of African innovation.
Mhm.
Our guest today is someone whose work I've admired for a long time. He's a systems thinker, a community builder, and one of the clearest voices on the evolution of diaspora investing. He is Joe Kinvi, founder of Borderless and co-founder of Oak. Joe has spent years building and operating at the frontier of fintech, from Stripe to Paystack to Touch Tech payments. And now he's focused on something deeply personal and deeply strategic, building the rails for diaspora capital. Joe, welcome to Africa to Alpha.
Thank you for having me, Chris. I'm so glad that you're doing this, and I'm very honored to be one of your guests.
Thank you. Joe, for the benefit of our listeners, how would you describe yourself?
I'm so glad that you kind of gave me heads up about this question, so I had a chance to think about it. I'm a founder first and foremost, and I'm a problem solver. I feel like the world is so full of many problems, and our duty as people living in this world is to solve them. I feel like the world has moved forward quite a lot, especially in the past 150 years, mostly because people have been focused on solving problems. And the way society currently rewards you is monetary. Right? So you solve a big problem, you create value for the world, and the world gives you a ton of money back. And I think over the past many years, we've seen a lot of billionaires, and when you double click into their story, one thing that you see is many of them are they're solving critical problems for the world, and they are creating tremendous value for the world. And nearly all of them are founders. Now we're not going to go into their background around family and stuff, but like at the core of it, most successful people are solving problems, and I just want to yeah, I like solving problems, so I'm a founder at heart.
Great. Thanks for that, Joe. So let's start with your journey. You've lived across continents, worked inside some of the most important fintech companies shaping Africa's digital economy. And now you're building infrastructure for diaspora investing.
Mhm.
What were the early experiences that shaped your thinking and eventually led you to create Borderless?
I've been a very curious child since I was little. I Oftentimes I wonder if everybody looks at the world the way I do, but everything that moves around me, I'm questioning it. I'm wondering like, how did this thing get here? And when I moved to Ireland at the age of 15 from Togo, for folks who don't
Yes,
know,
please.
yeah, I was talking about how it was Europe, and it's where you can be whoever you want to be, and I I took that literally. So I did my living cert. I studied accounting and finance university, and when I went into the workplace, I at least back then I got the best job I could have gotten at Ernst and Young, and most of my school classmates went on to work for all the big fours. So yeah, it was very nice to be in an environment where you're surrounded by really good people. But over time, I started noticing that working in auditing wasn't what I loved doing. And throughout that period from working in UI and working in State Street, where I went after, I was asking myself, like, am I really doing my best work? And the answer was no. And I realized that like technology was also one of the biggest, greatest enablers, and I really wanted to go into tech. So I went on to, I essentially quit my job cold turkey and wanted to pivot into tech, which was hard. But then again, I lived in a place like Ireland where I thought anything was possible. So I went into, I ended up working in tech. When I got into tech, I started meeting a lot more Black people in Ireland because many of them were moving from their home country to Ireland for work, right? So I started meeting a different breed of diasporans who, like in the past, folks would move abroad for many, many reasons, but this breed of diasporans were different, right? They're very well educated. They were making, like, they were coming to Ireland not because they needed Ireland, but I think Ireland needed them. They're very high taxpayers, people like yourself. Um, and I thought that this cohort of people were very much ignored, right? And people didn't really care about them. They're not going to the government to ask for, they weren't collecting a dole or anything like that. So like they were nearly invisible to the countries that they were living in, and that prompted the start of the African Professional Network because I wanted to essentially bring all those, myself and the co-founders wanted to bring these people together. And over time, we started Hulk while I was still working. And I started realizing that beyond these people being ignored, they also had money. They had money. Of course, they were paying taxes at very high rates. And in Ireland, you couldn't get a working visa unless you're making a minimum. Right? I don't know what the number is, like 40 or 50K, which is way above the median wage in Ireland. Right? So they also had money to invest, and that's where Hulk started from. Um, and then with Hulk, we just had so many challenges from opening a bank account, figuring out paperwork, and so many things. And I thought that the diaspora is actually an audience worth building for, building technology for first and foremost, but also because of how we organize. We organize in communities, in groups, and it's very great to see that you're organizing your own group of people through Real Corp, which runs on Borderless. And having people like you use the platform proves my thesis that there is a lot of diasporas out there with the right tools, they can come together and fund a bunch of stuff. Yes, like we like them to fund opportunities on the continent, but you can't fund opportunities from the continent if you don't know how to invest, right? So I see that like we did a deal recently, which it has nothing to do with Africa, but I thought that that was a good deal because it's opportunistic, and Black people should make money too. uh, we should all get the same opportunity as everybody else, and when we have a lot more money, then we can invest more on the continent, etc. But we need to be comfortable first and foremost. So Borderless is the brainchild of Hope because we couldn't have started Borderless if we didn't know the problems that we encountered through Hope. And I believe that Hulk itself is not enough. Like we need to have 1,000 of them, and I keep saying this, 1,000. And when you run the number, the number is it's so Hulk so far has done about $5 million, right, in capital deployed. I think to people like you as a member as well. But if you multiply that by 1,000, that's 5 billion. Like 5 billion going to Africa, or African founders or diaspora founders is a lot of money, and I think that it's something that's worth paying attention to. And then the second part, when you look at into the numbers a bit more, is the amount of money that the diaspora has access to that is idle, that's not invested, that's not touching anything risky, is between 30 and 40 billion. That's not my number. That's a number provided by the UN. I should think the number is more, right? Um, and I believe that with technology and the rails that exist today, we can essentially empower the diaspora to deploy this capital across the world, not just on the continent. And that will definitely contribute to the economic empowerment of the diaspora, which directly impacts Africa. So I know that's a very long-winded way to talk about how we ended up at Borderless. And I'm very excited for more and more people to really understand and discover the diaspora because I think we're actually really cool people. We're smart, we're rich, and I think that people should pay more attention.
Thanks, Joe. I mean, that's really interesting. Just, talking about your upbringing, then moving over to Ireland,
Mhm.
the frictions, realizing that, the diaspora have got money, and the issue wasn't really a lack of interest, but that of infrastructure, and then the
Mhm.
collective, just sort of coming up with the idea of borderless. I mean, I really love that. And what's powerful about your story is that it mirrors the experience of millions of Africans abroad. I mean, like you used Ireland as an example, but clearly, there's lots of, Africans, diasporans in the UK, in the US, in Canada, Australia,
Mhm.
just around the globe. And the fact is that there is that desire to contribute, but the absence of a clear, trusted pathway sort of, has been the hindrance. So just in terms of, the opportunity itself, let's talk a little bit about the scale of that opportunity. Over 40 million Africans live in the diaspora. I
Yeah.
think that's the estimate, They send money home to Africa much more than Africa actually receives from foreign direct investment or aid. And yet, most of that money goes into consumption, not
Mhm.
investment.
Yeah.
Why is this group so economically powerful and yet so under leverage? I know you touched a little bit around that, but just, what's your view on that?
So when you think about like where development goes, development capital essentially goes towards marginalized groups, right? And historically, a lot of people would move to Europe or America for school or for seek asylum, da 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 da. And a lot of development capital has gone into like integration, helping them settle, etc. So there's been a lot of studies in that space. However, maybe over the past 10 years, many people they have access to the internet. They can learn online. They can educate online. They have really good schools. And you have companies like Google, Meta, that are Amazon that are going to Africa to hire these people. I would love to credit Andela for training like thousands and thousands of engineers. And a lot of these companies were going to Lagos, Nairobi, Johannesburg to hire these people and bring them abroad, right? And when these folks come abroad, they don't need to integrate because they're getting fancy flats in Dublin city center, in London city center, in New York, Manhattan. And they are no different than the highest earners of the countries that they're moving to. The data suggests that they make anything between, like on average, between 60,000 to $200,000. That will put you like in a lot of the European countries, it'll put you quite high up in terms of highest earners. Um, so that's the first part. And when I ran some numbers on the GDP of the African diaspora, I think it's like 2 trillion, right? That's yeah. Is it one? It's one or two. If I need to revisit. If Let me just take the lower side, which is 1 trillion. That is a third of the entire GDP of Africa, except there's only 40 million of them. And if this group was a country, it would be the country with the highest GDP in Africa. Not just GDP, but also GDP per capita. Right? So, like, why are we not leveraging this audience to help fund the continent? And the reason why is because a lot of development capital is very focused on people who are, for lack of better word, at the bottom of the pile. And they're not paying attention to the guys at the top, which makes sense because these guys are doing really well. I do think that we need to spend more time to really understand them and figure out how we can support them. Many of these people, they've made money. I met a guy, I think it was last year, who said that he sent 200,000 euro back home for somebody to build a house for them, and the house does not exist. Right. And Chris, I'm sure you've heard these stories. Like nobody is using social welfare money to send 200,000 euro back home. Right. So the number is there, but because there's no development capital to really study this new diaspora, I think like that's an opportunity missed. And when I started doing my research, because I was one of them, like when I was working, like I was making six figures. I know many people that are making six figures, so I'm not oblivious to the potential or the earning power of the diaspora. Yeah, I touched on one of the numbers, which is 30 to 40 billion, but the 40 million people, I use the sentence, which is if each one of them just invest $1,000 a year, that's 40 billion that can be invested across the continent, across multiple asset classes, and in 10 years we'll close the funding gap, which is 420 billion dollars. That's what is estimated in terms of funding gap on the continent. And the thing with the way funding gaps work is the longer you leave it, the deeper it gets, right? So the longer we leave that gap, it's gonna go to 500 billion and then a trillion, and then sadly, while we've managed to escape the continent, like it's gonna actually get worse for people on the ground. And I think it's a matter of emergency for us to figure out how to help close that funding gap. Except we had to be very careful because you don't want to be putting money into something where you don't get money back, right? The work that we do or on the angel investment space is very risky, and we're all fully aware of that. But you can't pitch into investing to the entire diaspora. Like if you take the 40 million people, maybe 100,000 of us are doing angel investing. But then you have 3.9 million people. You can't sell angel investing to these people, but what you can sell to them is low risk or risk free investment opportunities. I remember you and I, when we met last year, we talked about, I think Bamboo has this product where they pay you like a fixed return. I don't know if it was 15 or 20% a
That's
year,
right.
right?
It was
Like,
about 18% at the time. Yeah,
what was it,
18,
15?
roughly 18%.
18%, right? These are the sort of instruments that we should open up to the diaspora because it's risk free. And in some cases, a lot of these companies pay you the return in advance, right? What we want to do with Borderless is, yes, we're starting with a high risk angel investment as a class, but we want to bring it all the way down to the average Joe, so that we go from 100,000 people to the entire 40. What is it, 100,000? Yeah, 100,000 people, like to the entire 40 million people, and that's where we're going to see real impact.
Right. That sounds really interesting, Joe. And I look forward to what Oak and Borderless is up to going forward.
Yeah.
Uh, just while you were speaking, there obviously there are maybe a couple of things that really jump out of that, and one is, you did mention someone sending money home to have
Mm,
a house or a property built, and obviously not no structure, not even a foundation put in place. In essence, we're saying that trust is the real is currency here. It's the real currency.
yeah.
And the other point around that is the diaspora is obviously the most aligned in terms of capital for Africa. But then the question is, what are the structures in place to actually enable that and to facilitate that? And I think that this is something that you've probably seen firsthand through Oak and through the other collectives that you've built. which have sort of deployed millions into early stage startups. Um, so just a question around that is, what did those early collective investing experiences teach you? What did you kind of learn from when you started with Oak? Obviously, there were challenges.
I think the issue of trust is still, or lack of trust rather, is still there. We don't trust each other because there are way too many stories of somebody being scammed, right? And we saw it. So the way we address that is communication. We over communicated. We share the good news and we share the bad news quite regularly, and that kind of helped build trusts. And also, I mean, on the call yesterday, we encourage people to give feedback, right? Somebody would trust you, Chris, because they'll trust when they hear that and they're like, "Oh, Chris said that." They're more likely to join Hoke instead of me teaching or preaching about the organization that I started. Over time, beyond consistent and constant communication, we want to be able to show like proof that this thing actually works, right? Yeah, I know there's a ton of regulation around why you can post publicly from like, or why you can't post publicly. But I think it's really important that just the way it's very easy to tell the story of somebody getting scammed, we need to tell the stories of people being successful and making money. It's a bit of a double-edged sword because when people hear that Joe or Chris have made money, they want a piece of it, aka black tax. So you have to be very careful. But like I think that we need to put the data out there. We need to let people know that the work that's been done is yielding fruits. And yeah, and I encourage you as you get onto this journey to just post the results, right? Good or bad. So that people can know that first of all you're doing something. Second of all, there's like data that can back the work that you're doing. Um, we on the real estate side, we have Diaspora House, and I'm very excited to share all the data, good and bad, around how the properties that we helped acquire last year, how they're performing. Um, I think the data is great. I think the performance is slightly higher than what they would make in the UK or other places. And like sharing results is a double-edged sword because when people see that Chris Collective is making X, they want a piece of it, right? And so you have to be really careful around how you share that information. But I think we need to, and also we need to figure out how to tell people to leave us alone because this is business. It's not like when I make it, I put all the work into it. You want a piece of it. That's not how it's going to work. So, but I think within our community, we need to share more. We need to learn more so that we can be financially educated um, and essentially move our community forward.
Thanks, Joe. I suppose one of the points that I really picked from this conversation, I mean, just what you said here is really around the fact that, as you mentioned, when I come up on your on Oak events, and I kind of make a contribution, not just myself. There are lots of other people within the ecosystem as they put their voices to it, and it's not just someone saying, "Oh, it's Joe speaking," and sort of supporting his platform.
Mm-hmm.
Again, this key point coming from there that people actually invest in people,
Mm-hmm.
not on platforms. So people aren't going to Borderless because it's Borderless. They're going there because, well, it's part of Joe, but also there's Nubi K, and also there's Chris K,
Mm-hmm.
and a few, a bunch of other people who, they kind of look up to, and they have a level of trust, you
Mm-hmm.
know, with these individuals. I mean, it's great because overall, I think what that indicates is that the diaspora truly want to participate. So they just sort of need the rails,
Yeah.
which kind of, leads me into the infrastructure piece, because this is where Borderless is actually, doing something truly transformative. I came to Oak and, was before it was kind of, it transitioned and kind of split up into Oak and Borderless. I definitely came in, and as I've shared previously, it was just one of the fantastic things that I found. And I thought, where have I been? I'd lost out so much. I lost out on the mono, on Flutterwave. And I'm like, where were these guys and why didn't you announce yourself? So it just kind of shows that even the education piece that you mentioned, there's still a
Mm,
lot of happen. There's still a lot of outreach to happen there. Lots of diasporans who are out there, and like you said, they fall within that bracket, but
mhm.
they still don't know what's available to them and to take advantage. So let's dive into that. When you kind of say build rails, building the rails for diaspora capital, what does that actually mean? So just for our listeners.
When I think about infrastructure, I look at it in three parts, right? So the first part is the investment itself. Like, how do you facilitate investment end to end? Bringing deals, etc. And so you need to build infrastructure for that. The second, really, really critical, is compliance infrastructure. The fact that the diaspora is dispersed, like you and I in the UK, there are people in Ireland, people in the US, people in Canada. Each location is subject to different compliance laws. So you have to be very, uh, you need to really understand how compliance works in all these regions in order to be able to enable people to deploy capital. It's very easy to like if everybody was in the UK and we're all investing in UK companies and everything is in GBP, easy peasy. But we have to be fully aware that diaspora is spread across the world, and we need to build something that reflects that situation from a compliance perspective. So that's compliance is actually one of my biggest challenges, and I'm lucky that I have the people around who are supporting me, lawyers and ex-colleagues, and yeah, a bunch of people that really make sure that that compliance matters because it also plays part in the trust building exercise, right? And one of our biggest thing that we want to do this year is go direct to the FCA and get regulated. Yeah, so that's the beast that I'm going on this year, and I'm really trying to get it done in record time because once we have that, then everybody can essentially leverage our compliance infrastructure at scale. The third and obvious one is the money movement. Again, same thing. Diaspora, you and I were here in the UK, we use GBP. People are in Ireland, they use Euro. US, they use USD. People are in Dubai, they're using AED. How do you, okay, so that's the first part. The second part of it is how do you, you're investing in real estate in Nigeria, then you need some money to NGN. You're collecting rent in NGN, you need to figure out how do you collect that money and pay back people. So you need to really understand how the money movement rails work, right? How do you collect easily, cheaply, efficiently, safely? And how do you deploy that capital? And when there is returns to harvest, you need to essentially pay people back. Very, very lucky that the majority of my career has been in fintech. With a lot of the work that I did at Stripe, but also spent a year in at Paystack doing financial partnerships which helps a lot. So I've been very lucky to really understand the payment rails. Actually, I think halfway through my time at Paystack, I was like, holy crap, we can actually solve this because I got to understand how money moves in Africa. From like, the truth is when you go to Nigeria, money moves differently from the way it does in Ghana, differently from the way it moves in South Africa. So halfway through my time at Paystack, I was like, okay, I think I've kind of brought all the pieces of the puzzle together to solve this problem at scale. So, yeah, those are the three things: the investment, the compliance, and the money movement. There are other things like reporting. How do you make lives of collective managers very easy? How do you monitor projects remotely? So there is what we call borderless infrastructure, is because there's so many things that are happening. And when I was raising money last year, I struggled teaching folks because many of these calls are 30 minutes. right? And we've already been speaking for more than 30 minutes, and I don't think we've covered everything. There's so many, it's so layered that I hope that more investors just listen and learn. Um, and I am very bullish on the diaspora. And if you watch what's happening on the continent, there's so much happening. There is a lot more spotlights in on Africa from multiple angles, and I think now is the right time for people to really take investment on the continent seriously.
Certainly, certainly. And I suppose, as you mentioned, Borderless is still on its journey.
Hmm.
And I recall one of the conversations, I think you were having recently around trying to make life easier for, I think, diasporans in the US who are investing and given, the cost of making their remittances when they're about to commit to investments, and you're looking for sort of alternative ways to help them to make their transfers without incurring some of those charges. So that's really some of the excellent work you're doing,
Thank you.
in terms of multi-currency management and then the compliance automation piece. And so when you kind of zoom out, right, what does the next decade look like for diaspora participation from your perspective?
Oh no, we should be. My goal is to reach 40 billion a year in amount transacted on Borderless. That's the goal. I hope that happens sooner than later. Um, and with the right infrastructure, I think we can do it. When people know that the money that they're sending is safe, is going where it's supposed to go to, and when they get a return, the return will come back to them. Everybody will use the platform. And of course, in between that, there's going to be a lot of things that happen. Things like, oh, how do you make Borderless? How do you turn Borderless into an API? Or you don't have to go on the platform anymore, but somebody comes on the Real Corp website and they can transact easily without knowing that it's powered by us, right? How do you make it very easy for WhatsApp groups to essentially get a link and make investments effortlessly? How do you make it very easy for governments to essentially allow their citizens to invest in local bonds, which is powered by Borderless? Like the opportunities are endless for what we can build. Um, but again, you just have to, like, infrastructure is not built overnight. There's a lot of learning, unlearning, and building that's required. And yeah, like the next 10 years from an AUM perspective, my goal is 40 billion. Like I love to see where we go public. Um, because again, like being on a public exchange breeds trust, right? I love to see how we actually hand over management to people who are more experienced than us. And like, I don't think I'm the one who's going to finish this work because it's decades long. But my goal is to get it to a place where it can run by itself. And lastly, I really want Borderless to be invisible. Like, I don't want people to know. Like, when you're using Swift, you don't know you're using Swift. You're just sending money, right? And that Swift is was a brainchild of somebody, and over time, it just became embedded in global systems. That's where I see what we're building, and that's the vision really. Like, I don't want people to be talking about Borderless. I just want people to know that, oh, Chris just launched his collective, and you can easily go through an entire process without having to seek Chris, or without having to be in Nigeria, without having to be in Kenya, and you can move capital easily in and move capital easily out. But of course, I'm sure you know that we're very far from that. But the good news is I've got plenty of energy like, I've got a lot of energy to really build this thing out. So because I care about it, I think it needs to happen. And I always say that I think I'm probably the best person to build this. And yeah, like, it's nearly 3 years since who embarked on this crazy journey. And yeah, I'm very, very excited for it.
Joe, that's a really powerful vision, and thanks for sharing that. I am certainly on board because I also believe when I get into something, then I have to really sort of give it my all.
Mhm.
And then just also from, earlier conversation when you spoke around, wanting more collectives, I can see ultimately, getting to that number will definitely involve a lot more diasporans coming in and sort of setting up their own collectives. And like you mentioned, the millions of, transfers going across the world on a daily basis via SWIFT and through other mechanisms. And no one really wonders or bothers about who actually invented SWIFT. So
Mhm.
that's really powerful because I suppose what you're describing isn't just fintech.
No.
It's really about economic empowerment at scale. 40 billion, and who knows, it could even be double or even triple, 3x that amount. So that's
Mhm.
a really fantastic vision.
Thank you.
Um, so just before we wrap, you're a founder, and I know you're busy. You need to really get back to work. Uh, just want to tap into your experience as both an investor and a founder. Um, what advice do you give to emerging angels in the diaspora?
Hmm. I've got a lot of advice. I think more people should just like be open-minded first and foremost, learn, like it's really educate, and then test it out. That's it. Like, be open-minded, learn and test it out. Like the thing with angel investing is not something that you can learn in school. You can learn it in class. You can watch all the videos that you want. Like you will not become an angel investor if you after taking all the courses you have to do, right? And I've been advising a couple of groups that train people, and my advice to them is, hey, after you train them, get them to practice. Practice means writing $1,000 check into a company, because when you're putting your money into this, it now becomes real. Forget the outcomes. Yes, like nobody wants to lose money, but forget the outcome. Just the act of the act of angel investing is angel investing, not courses, not classes. And the thing with angel investing, Chris, and I'm sure you can tell, is like you can't just do one investment and say, okay, I'm done. It's first a numbers game, and you can't predict what the outcome is going to be. You can't, right? And if you could, many people would be much much richer than they are. But like I think you have to first of all, if you have the money to invest, please don't be investing unless you're not willing to lose money, right? And if you're thinking about paying anything between £3,000 to £5,000 for an angel investment course, I encourage you to go to YouTube, learn for free, and invest £5,000 into 5 companies. That would be my advice for emerging angel investors. And yeah, like you learn so much. And also, I think angel investment, especially in Africa, we need to rethink it. I don't think we have enough venture backable companies. Like in the US, like Chris, you and I will fly to San Francisco today, and we can find at least 1,000 companies to invest in easily that are venture scale. It might not be something that we care about or excited about, or because we have different things that we care about. But there are so many companies. Like we don't have enough founders, enough builders. What that means is sometimes angel investing might require investing in things that might not necessarily provide venture returns. And I think again that's a conversation for another day. But I think more and more people should really um, just do instead of like learn, but do. That's what makes you an angel investor.
I like that. That's basically saying, get a skin in the game. And,
Yeah.
and as they say, you have to be in it to win it.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
don't participate, you can't say you want to be declared a winner. And that's interesting. So that's kind of like, from the angel angle. And we know there's two sides to the table, right? So when you
Hmm.
sit on one side of the table as an angel, there's someone else on the opposite side, and that's the founder. So for founders listening, any piece, any nuggets for them?
Yes, I mean, I think founders actually have very heavy weight on their shoulders, and a lot of angels are looking at you to be the one that saves them from all their other investments. Um, I think again, like you are my cap table. I think last year I said 10 investor updates out of 12. I think I combined 2 months. I combined November, December. I think I combined 1 month in the summer. Um, what is good news or bad news? I always make sure to keep my investors up to date around what's happening. And I've seen that I received a lot of help from my angels and other investors because they know what's happening in my company. I really encourage founders, regardless of what's happening, just keep your investors up to date. God forbid if Borderless doesn't work, I am confident that my angels will back me again because, like, it's not because Joe did not put the work in. Um, and I want more and more people to be founders, but they also need to remember that they are custodian of people's money. And you have to do right by your investors. And if you don't want to do that, then don't take money from anybody. If you don't want to report, then don't take the money. If you don't want to be held accountable, then don't take the money. The good news is many angels, when they write the check, they immediately write it off to zero. But that should not be an excuse for founders to act the fool. So I really encourage founders to think twice before they take people's money. And when you take the money, know that it comes with strings. No strings in the sense that you know it, but like there are expectations. The expectation ultimately for any decent sane investor is this person will return my money multiple folds. And beyond that, just let them know what's happening monthly, quarterly, and just keep them updated with the business. I think that's the least you can do as an investor, as a founder.
Thanks for that, Joe. I think just bringing the key points from that, which is basically sort of, you hammered on building with integrity, and then there's that communication often, or, as required,
Hmm.
understanding your investors' incentives, recognizing that, there's expectation. And then it seems like, also thinking long term because, the capital's relationship. So
Hmm.
you're gonna be in that sort of, relationship for a good while.
Yeah.
Wow. Joe, thank you so much. This has been an incredible conversation. Your clarity, your mission, your commitment to building infrastructure for diaspora is absolutely inspiring. Thank you for joining us on Africa to Alpha. Thank you so much.
Thank you.